New footage of Tupac's body. At his funeral, changes everything. What if everything you thought you knew about Tupac's final hours was wrong? In 2025, a 14-second clip surfaced, grainy, eerie, and deeply unsettling, appearing to show a moment the world was told never happened. A body in an open casket, candlelight flickering, shadows of silent witnesses. If this footage is real, it doesn't just challenge the official story, it shatters it. Before we dive into the truth, the rumors, and the explosive implications, make sure you subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence, where we uncover the untold stories behind the icons who shaped our world. The leaked 14-second funeral footage. It starts with a flicker and a frame. In 2025, almost 30 years after Tupac Shakur's death, a 14-second clip quietly appeared online and sent a shock through everyone who thought they already knew how his story ended. The video is dark, the image slightly blurred, the sound almost non-existent. Yet in the center of the shot, surrounded by candlelight, lies a figure in a polished casket whose face and build strongly resemble Tupac. No police agency, court, or coroner has authenticated the recording, but for many viewers, especially those who watched his rise in the 1990s, the resemblance feels impossible to ignore. 14 seconds isn't much, but in this case it's enough to stir every unanswered question people have carried for decades. What makes this fragment so unsettling is how sharply it cuts against the version of events that has been accepted for years. According to public records and contemporaneous reporting, his remains were handled swiftly after his passing and cremated soon after, in line with the wishes of his mother and immediate relatives. That account always emphasized privacy, no viewing open to mourners, no press, no opportunity for anyone to film a farewell. The new clip, if taken at face value, shows the exact opposite: a quiet room, a body prepared for display, an unmistakable sense of ritual. If it truly depicts Tupac, then there was a moment of viewing that the world was never told about. If it does not, then someone somewhere created or preserved a remarkably specific illusion. For the people who grew up with his music, who remember hearing California Love or Dear Mama on the radio in real time, the emotional impact has been intense. Online discussions, radio shows, and neighborhood barbershop conversations have reached for the same phrase: the most chilling 14 seconds in hip-hop history. It's not just the sight of the still body that unnerves them. It's the sense that a private goodbye may have been captured without consent, hidden away, and then allowed to leak out nearly 3 decades later. Fans who accepted the family's decision to keep his final moments sacred now find themselves staring at a possible breach of that boundary, torn between wanting answers and wanting to honor the desire for dignity that guided those original choices. At the center of all this is a tension that goes far beyond one videotape. The Shakur family has long been seen as careful guardians of Tupac's memory, insisting that his passing not become a spectacle. The official timeline reflects that stance: swift arrangements, minimal exposure control over imagery. This new recording challenges that picture, not because it proves a conspiracy, but because it hints at something unrecorded in the public narrative: a discreet ceremony, a last look, a camera that should never have been rolling. Whether the footage shows the real Tupac or not, it forces people to confront how fragile the official story can be and how powerful his legacy remains. 14 seconds of shaky video cannot rewrite documented facts, but they can remind millions that for them, Tupac was never just another headline. He was a life, a loss, and a wound that still hasn't fully closed. The Vegas shooting and hospital rush. Nightfall in Las Vegas has always carried a certain electricity, but the evening of September 7th, 1996, felt charged in a different way. Crowds poured into the MGM Grand to witness the heavyweight showdown between Mike Tyson and Bruce Seldon, a match that drew celebrities, athletes, and music figures from across the country. Among them was Tupac Shakur, whose career was at its peak, and the executive seated beside him, Suge Knight. The pair arrived with the same sense of anticipation as everyone else in the arena, unaware that within hours, the night would take a turn no one could have predicted. When Tyson won in a swift and decisive first round, the building erupted, and thousands streamed toward the exits in a frenzy of noise lights and adrenaline. That victory set the timeline in motion, placing Tupac and Suge back on the strip at precisely the wrong moment. As the energy of the fight spilled onto the streets, the two men left the venue and returned to their hotel before heading out again, planning to attend an event hosted by their associates. They traveled in a black BMW sedan, navigating the thick post-fight traffic that clogged Las Vegas Boulevard. The strip glowed with its usual neon spectacle, but beneath its brightness lay a series of choices and circumstances converging in silence. By the time their car approached the intersection of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, the flow of vehicles had slowed to a crawl. Music played, pedestrians moved along the sidewalks, and nothing suggested that danger was seconds away. Yet behind them, beside them, and circling in the distance were vehicles whose movements would soon matter far more than the traffic jam around them. What happened next took mere moments. A light-colored Cadillac pulled alongside the passenger side of the BMW, its windows lowering with deliberate calm. Witnesses later recalled no argument, no warning, no exchange, only the sudden eruption of gunfire, sharp and rapid, cutting through the night. 13 rounds were discharged, striking the vehicle repeatedly. 4 bullets hit Tupac, causing severe injuries to his torso and extremities, while Suge sustained a graze wound from fragments. The BMW lurched forward, its tires screeching against the pavement as Suge attempted to escape the barrage. Nearby drivers ducked, screamed, or froze, unsure of what they had just witnessed. The strip, always loud and restless, fell into a jarring contrast of panic and confusion. What seconds before was routine nightlife instantly became a scene of chaos marked by shattered glass and the metallic echo of violence. Emergency responders arrived quickly after the ambush was reported. Police secured the area while medical personnel worked to stabilize Tupac, whose condition had rapidly deteriorated. He was rushed to the University Medical Center, the region's primary trauma facility, where doctors and nurses began a race against time. The severity of his wounds demanded immediate intervention, and the hospital staff moved with urgency, familiar only to those accustomed to life or death crises. Outside officers gathered statements and surveyed the damaged vehicle, attempting to piece together the sequence of events. Inside, machines beeped steadily as surgeons prepared for intensive procedures. From the moment the shooting occurred to the instant Tupac entered the operating room, only minutes had passed, but they were minutes that changed the course of hip-hop history forever. Gobi's account. 6 nights at UMC. The hours after the shooting felt unreal to Gobi M. Rahimi, a filmmaker who had worked closely with Tupac on numerous creative projects. When he arrived at the trauma center, he stepped into a waiting area filled with anxiety so thick it seemed to absorb the fluorescent light above. He saw familiar faces, relatives of the label executive who had been driving legal representative security leadership and members of Tupac's inner circle. Kidada Jones stood by a payphone overwhelmed with fear, while Jamala tried unsuccessfully to reach additional support. Gobi moved through the room quietly, still processing the violence he had just learned about, hoping for clarity, but finding only silence and the low hum of hospital machinery behind closed doors. Moments later, medical staff emerged with sobering news: the injuries were extensive. The right lung had to be removed, and surgeons were preparing for an ordeal that would last through the night. As the hours stretched, the tension inside the facility only deepened. Calls were made to assistants Yasmin and Molly, who scrambled to gather information and relay updates to loved ones outside Nevada. Gobi found himself watching the steady stream of personnel passing through the corridor: doctors, nurses, administrative workers, each carrying the gravity of the moment in their expression. Suge Knight's parents sat close together, clinging to whatever reassurance the staff could provide. David Kenner maintained a calm, professional posture, speaking in low tones with Reggie Wright Jr. about logistics, safety, and communication. Meanwhile, Kidada remained near the waiting room wall, folding and unfolding her hands, holding onto every word spoken by employees, attempting to stabilize Tupac behind the doors of the operating suite. Those first hours felt endless, as though time itself had slowed in reverence for the struggle unfolding inside. As the first night turned into the second, then the third, the environment began to shift. Gobi, who refused to leave the building for long, described an uneasiness that grew with each passing day. Strangers appeared in the halls, people no one recognized, dressed as though they belonged, yet asking questions no visitor should have known to ask. Unmarked vehicles idled around the premises, prompting concern among those guarding the entrances. Rumors of threats circulated, adding to the already simmering fear. Federal agents in plain clothing moved discreetly through the building, observing the flow of foot traffic and monitoring areas near the intensive care unit. Their presence lent credibility to the sense that something larger was happening, something beyond the tragedy already unfolding. For Gobi, these encounters reinforced a single truth: the hospital had become a battleground of worry, protection, and uncertainty. By the fifth night, hospital administration strengthened security measures, but it was the arrival of the fruit of Islam that truly altered the atmosphere. Members of the group positioned themselves with calm precision, creating a protective barrier around the most vulnerable areas. Their quiet discipline offered a rare moment of order amid the mounting chaos. Gobi continued his vigil, stepping in and out of the waiting room, watching the changing rhythms of the facility as the days blurred together. Every hour he hoped for good news, but updates remained grim. Tupac lay unconscious, surrounded by machines that breathed for him, while those on the outside grappled with fear, exhaustion, and the weight of helplessness. For 6 nights, the hospital became a world unto itself, a place where danger and hope lived side by side, where every whisper felt urgent, and where one man's fight for life became a shared vigil for everyone who loved him. Official story: death and immediate cremation. The afternoon of September 13, 1996 settled over Las Vegas with a heavy stillness as the medical team made their final assessment. At 4:03 p.m., the attending physicians formally pronounced Tupac Shakur deceased, ending 6 days of struggle marked by aggressive treatment and fluctuating hope. The announcement traveled through the hospital corridors with a quiet finality, reaching those gathered outside and quickly spreading to newsrooms across the country. For his mother, Afeni Shakur, the loss was devastating, yet she moved with remarkable clarity. She immediately asserted control over every detail concerning her son's remains, determined to preserve dignity and prevent the media circus she feared would follow. With years of experience confronting public scrutiny, she did not hesitate. The arrangements would be swift, private, and shielded from outsiders. In the early hours that followed, the family coordinated with a funeral provider in Southern California, choosing a path that allowed no time for speculation or intrusion. By the morning of September 14th, arrangements were in place for a discreet cremation in Los Angeles, carried out according to Afeni's explicit instructions. No photographs were permitted. No extended viewing was scheduled. No congregation of mourners would be allowed to gather around a casket. Those closest to Tupac understood that Afeni's decision stemmed from a deep desire to prevent her son from becoming a public spectacle in death. Members of the label's inner circle who had accompanied the family through the night were made aware of the plan and cooperated with the urgency of the moment. The atmosphere surrounding those preparations was somber and tense, shaped by the sense that time itself was a threat. Every additional hour increased the risk of leaks, crowds, and cameras. The following days unfolded with a different tone. After the cremation was completed, a small group traveled to Malibu for a quiet gathering along the shoreline. Those present formed a modest circle, speaking softly, sharing memories and releasing their grief into the rhythm of the Pacific. The simplicity of the gathering reflected the wishes of the family. No spectacle, no media presence, only a moment of farewell shaped by love and sorrow. Later, a larger event was held in Harlem, honoring Tupac's roots and offering a space for admirers to grieve together. This ceremony was the only public acknowledgement of his passing sanctioned by the family, allowing the wider community to mourn while still protecting the sanctity of the earlier private rites. Through these carefully chosen steps, Afeni and her relatives preserved what they believed mattered most, a farewell defined by sincerity rather than spectacle. Yet even with a clear timeline, lingering uncertainties have surrounded those immediate posthumous hours. Reports circulated about a crematory employee who left his position shortly after the procedure, fueling speculation despite the lack of verified information. Additional questions arose when no mortuary facility publicly confirmed handling the body before it was transported for cremation, unusual only in the sense that transparency was intentionally limited. Angela's funeral home, often mentioned in public discussions, denied any involvement with unauthorized imagery and maintained that all interactions were conducted within the strict boundaries set by the family. These ambiguities do not alter the documented facts, but they continue to intrigue those who search for clarity. What remains indisputable is that the Shakur family acted decisively, guided by love and a desire to protect Tupac's memory from the harsh glare of public sensationalism. Open casket clip versus the official narrative. The emergence of a 14-second recording in 2025 introduced a jarring visual contradiction to one of the most documented farewells in modern music history. The clip, dimly illuminated by candlelight and captured on aging analog equipment, appears to reveal a body resting inside an open casket. The face posture and identifiable markings bear a striking resemblance to Tupac Shakur, whose passing a day earlier had already become international news. A small cluster of silhouettes surrounds the casket, standing in stillness as if participating in a private vigil. The atmosphere conveyed by the footage feels intimate, hushed, and unmistakably ceremonial. What intensified public intrigue was the timestamp embedded on the recording, September 14, 1996, the very day publicly cited as the date of Tupac's confidential cremation. This alignment between the alleged viewing and the official cremation date created an immediate tension between documented history and what the camera seemed to show. The venue shown in the clip resembles a modest mortuary space, sparking speculation about whether it could be linked to a facility such as Angela's funeral home, a location often mentioned in discussions about the handling of high-profile individuals. Though the establishment has firmly denied participating in or allowing any unauthorized visual documentation, the setting in the video includes arrangement choices associated with funeral parlors of the era, velvet draping metal stands, and a style of candle placement consistent with 1990s memorial aesthetics. A handful of observers believe the brief images may depict a moment accessible only to a select group, possibly individuals connected to the record label who were present during the chaotic hours after Tupac's death. These suggestions remain unverified, but they linger because the footage portrays an environment difficult to interpret as anything other than a structured final viewing. Viewers noted physical details that added to the swirling questions. The tattoos visible in the recording appear consistent with those documented on Tupac during his lifetime, including placement and outline shape. Facial contours also share similarities with his well-known features. Yet, a closer look raised concerns. The chest area shown in the clip does not display the surgical marks reported in the coroner's documentation, particularly the incision from emergency interventions performed at the trauma center. This discrepancy led analysts to propose competing explanations. One possibility is that mortuary preparation involved reconstructive work or cosmetic covering typically used for viewings, which can soften the appearance of invasive medical procedures. Another viewpoint suggests the footage may not be authentic, but instead crafted, altered, or misinterpreted an imitation that mimics recognizable traits without perfectly replicating clinical details. These conflicting elements have fueled ongoing debate about the clip's origin and intent. If the recording depicts a genuine farewell prior to cremation, it would mean some form of brief gathering occurred behind closed doors, despite the family's stated preference for privacy. If the video is not authentic, then its creation represents an effort to evoke a powerful emotional response by simulating a moment that never happened. Either way, the footage unsettles because it touches on a deeply sensitive Chapter 1, where verified timelines, family directives, and public memory intersect. The camera does not provide answers. Instead, it exposes how a few seconds of imagery can challenge long-accepted narratives and remind the world how fragile historical certainty can be when extraordinary loss and enduring legacy collide. From Tyson fight to drive-by ambush, the morning of September 7, 1996 began quietly for Tupac Shakur inside his suite at the Luxor, where he had spent the night with Kidada Jones. The sunlight filtering across the room did little to lift the uneasy mood that had settled over him in the weeks before the trip, tension born from professional disputes, sudden changes in his security structure, and an increasing sense of unpredictability surrounding his life. Still, the plan for the evening was simple. Meet Suge Knight, attend the heavily anticipated heavyweight bout between Mike Tyson and Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand, then continue on to a gathering afterward. Tupac prepared for the day with the same urgency that had defined his schedule throughout 1996, unaware of how profoundly this night would alter the course of music history. When he and Suge finally stepped into the arena, the energy inside was explosive. Every seat was filled, every roar felt amplified, and thousands waited to witness Tyson's return to the ring. What happened next unfolded with the velocity of a storm. Tyson ended the fight in a single round, sending the audience into a frenzy and pushing the crowd into the casino corridors in a wave of excitement. Amid the chaos, Travon Trey D. Lane, a close associate of the label, spotted Orlando. Baby Lane Anderson, someone known for having forcibly taken a coveted emblem from a member of their circle weeks earlier. That confrontation had simmered beneath the surface for days, and Lane's discovery ignited it instantly. Tupac charged toward Anderson with instinctive force, striking him before security or bystanders could intervene. Within seconds, others from their group joined the scuffle. Surveillance cameras captured the melee, showing Anderson overwhelmed, knocked to the floor, and left in a state of humiliation. The altercation lasted only moments, but its emotional impact was profound. Witnesses later recalled seeing Anderson leave the area visibly enraged, muttering words that suggested the conflict was far from over. After the brawl, Tupac returned briefly to the Luxor, where Kidada urged him to stay in for the night. She sensed a storm surrounding him, one made up of pressure obligations and unseen threats. But commitments to the evening's planned celebration persisted, and Tupac chose to join Suge for the trip to Club 662, a venue associated with their company. He changed outfits, grabbing fresh jewelry and a new shirt, then headed downstairs to meet Suge in the lobby. The strip pulsed with its usual lights and crowds as they climbed into Suge's black BMW, accompanied by additional vehicles carrying members of their entourage. The streets were congested in the aftermath of the fight, creating delays and forcing the caravan to navigate slowly through Las Vegas traffic. Even in the midst of conversation and music, a quiet intensity hung in the car, the kind that precedes events no one senses clearly until it is too late. As the BMW approached the intersection of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, the night's turbulence culminated in a single devastating instant. The car rolled to a stop at a red light, surrounded by typical weekend activity drivers, chatting pedestrians, waiting to cross engines, idling in the desert heat. Then a white Cadillac pulled up beside them with practiced calm, its window lowered. A volley of gunfire shattered the stillness, sending a cascade of bullets into the passenger side of the BMW. Tupac was struck multiple times, while Suge sustained injuries from fragments and shattered glass. The attack lasted mere seconds, yet the violence of that moment echoed across decades. The intersection that had been just another corner of the strip became the epicenter of a tragedy that would reshape hip-hop, ending an extraordinary night with a catastrophe the world has never forgotten. 6 days in a coma and conflicting reports. The 6 days that followed the shooting placed Tupac Shakur at the center of an exhausting medical battle, one defined by relentless procedures and a constant struggle to keep his body stable. Surgeons at the trauma facility worked around the clock performing multiple operations intended to repair damaged organs, stop internal bleeding, and give him a chance to survive the devastating injuries he had suffered. One of the most difficult decisions came early removal of the right lung, a drastic measure taken to prevent further deterioration. Machines surrounded his bed, assisting with breathing and monitoring every vital sign. For those who gathered in the waiting area, each update delivered by the staff carried enormous weight. Among them was Gobi Rahimi, who had been with Tupac throughout countless creative moments and now found himself in the unimaginable position of waiting for news about his friend's life. During those long days, information moved slowly and often inconsistently, creating a fog of uncertainty around Tupac's condition. Nurses and physicians briefed the group regularly, trying to balance honesty with compassion. On the morning of September 13th, a nurse quietly told Gobi that Tupac seemed 13% better, a hopeful but vague measure that left everyone unsure how to interpret it. Meanwhile, Afeni Shakur remained fiercely protective of her son, speaking with the medical team, asking questions, and assessing each development with the steady determination that had guided her through far more difficult chapters in her life. Outside the intensive care unit, the presence of plainclothes law enforcement and new security precautions created an underlying tension, evidence of the broader concerns surrounding the high-profile patient receiving treatment inside. As the final day approached, conflicting accounts about Tupac's level of awareness began to circulate. In later interviews, Suge Knight shared memories suggesting that Tupac had spoken and even joked shortly before complications led to his passing. These recollections contrasted sharply with clinical documentation, indicating that he never regained full consciousness after the initial trauma. Medical records emphasized sedation, mechanical ventilation, and a decline that could not be reversed despite aggressive care. This discrepancy between personal memory and medical notation has fueled debate for decades, leaving admirers and observers wondering what truly transpired in the final hours. Adding to the complexity was the growing presence of the Fruit of Islam, who formed a protective barrier around the hospital's entrances, responding to fears of escalating threats and ensuring order as the situation became increasingly sensitive. The moments immediately after Tupac was pronounced dead, 4:03 p.m. on September 13, 1996, introduced another layer of mystery that continues to raise questions. The official announcement to the public did not occur until approximately 2 hours later, creating a gap that has been scrutinized repeatedly. During that window, the movement of Tupac's remains was not publicly detailed, and the rapid decisions that followed, coordinated by Afeni and supported by those closest to him, left little room for outside visibility. Some observers have speculated that this period may have allowed someone to capture the controversial footage that appeared decades later, though no verified evidence confirms such a claim. What is certain is that the final hours inside the medical center were marked by grief, confusion, and a profound sense of loss. Even now, the mixture of documented facts, differing recollections, and unanswered questions continues to shape how people understand the last chapter of Tupac Shakur's life. Malibu Memorial and the Smoking Ashes Claim. The gathering on the shores of Malibu took place in the soft glow of dusk, where the waves rolled in with a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the emotions of everyone present. It was not a public ceremony, nor a flashy display of celebrity mourning, but rather an intimate farewell chosen by Afeni Shakur to honor her son in the most human way possible. A bonfire crackled as flames rose into the ocean breeze, sending sparks into the twilight sky. Roughly 30 to 50 people formed a loose circle around it, sharing quiet conversations, embracing one another and letting Tupac's music drift through small speakers that someone had placed on the sand. For a moment, the relentless noise of the world fell away, replaced by the sound of drums, whispered prayers, and the steady pulse of waves breaking along the California coast. Among those who joined the tribute were close companions from every chapter of Tupac's journey. Members of Outlaws stood near the fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering light as they reflected on years of collaboration and friendship. Jada Pinkett Smith, who had known Tupac since their formative days at the Baltimore School for the Arts, stepped quietly among the attendees, offering comfort with gentle words and steady presence. Snoop Dogg appeared grieving in his own understated way, sharing memories with those nearby as the night deepened. Afeni, at the center of the gathering, maintained an air of strength, even as sorrow weighed heavily on her. The gathering held no speeches, no formal structure. It was simply a space for those who loved Tupac to sit close, listen to his voice through the speakers, and let the fire carry their pain upward. In the years that followed, a controversial detail emerged from recollections shared by Outlaws members, such as Young Noble and Idi Amin. They described mixing a portion of what they believed to be Tupac's ashes into a rolled cigarette, an act they said was inspired by a lyric he once wrote about wanting his remains to be smoked by his comrades. The story spread quickly, becoming one of the most debated anecdotes tied to Tupac's passing. The Shakur family, however, firmly rejected this account, calling it both unauthorized and deeply disrespectful. Afeni, who had guarded her son's dignity from the moment he entered the public eye, viewed the claim as incompatible with the principles that guided the private farewell she had organized. The conflicting narratives, one rooted in grief-driven tribute, the other in a mother's desire for reverence, illustrated the emotional complexity of that moment on the beach. These disputes gained renewed attention when decades later the controversial open casket footage surfaced online. If the recording truly showed Tupac's body on the very day he was reportedly cremated, questions naturally followed. Was the cremation timeline fully accurate? Could there have been a viewing before the final rites? And most provocatively, if the ashes used in the Outlaw's story were not authentic, what exactly had been placed in that cigarette? None of these questions have been answered conclusively, and no official source has verified the footage. Yet the existence of these uncertainties demonstrates how powerful Tupac's legacy remains. The Malibu Memorial was intended as a moment of peace, but its surrounding myths have grown into something larger, evidence of how deeply he continues to resonate with those who loved him, and how fiercely people cling to every detail of his final days. The Mystery, Hi-8 Tape, and F. James Media. The story behind the 14-second recording gained a new layer of intrigue when information surfaced about how the tape allegedly made its way into public view. According to accounts circulating among researchers, the clip originated on an old Hi-8 cassette, a home video format widely used during the mid-1990s. The tape was reportedly handed off by an unnamed technician employed by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, someone who claimed to have discovered it while reviewing materials from a long-archived evidence box. The technician insisted the container had been mislabeled as vehicle photos, BMW 750IL, a reference to the car involved in the shooting. Why a video potentially showing a body in a casket would be stored in such a box remains unclear. Nevertheless, the anonymous employee passed the tape to an independent archivist based in Compton, believing the contents warranted further examination before fading into obscurity. The archivist, accustomed to restoring damaged media from the 1980s and 1990s, approached the tape with a mixture of caution and professional curiosity. Upon inspection, the cassette proved consistent with Sony Hi-8 models sold during that decade, from the plastic casing down to the oxide patterns on the magnetic strip. Once digitized, the file revealed embedded data, suggesting it had undergone an analog-to-digital transfer sometime between 2003 and 2005, during the early era of consumer video conversion. That timing raised questions of its own. If the transfer occurred so long ago, why had the footage remained hidden? And who performed the conversion? The archivist offered no clear answers, stating only that the file's numerical signatures supported a mid-2000s digitization. Beyond that, the origins remained as opaque as the shadows visible in the flickering frames. Further confusion emerged from a detail buried deep within the hospital transfer paperwork from 1996. an unfamiliar name listed in connection with the handling of Tupac's remains, F. James Media. No journalist production company or known associate has ever publicly claimed that identity. Was it a clerical error, a placeholder, or the alias of someone documenting private moments during a fragile, heavily protected period? The ambiguity has fueled speculation but offered no definitive explanation. Researchers who reviewed the footage also noted two brief reflections visible in the glass behind the casket. When enhanced, the shapes resembled the stylized emblem associated with death row records printed on a jacket worn by a person partially out of frame. This detail aligned with the possibility that individuals connected to the label may have been present during the filming, though no verified source has confirmed this involvement. Together, these elements form a chain of mysteries rather than a single cohesive origin story. An anonymous police employee, a mislabeled evidence container, a mid-2000s digital conversion, a cryptic name in the transport log, and a fleeting logo reflected in polished glass. Each detail complicates the narrative. None provide irrefutable proof of authenticity, yet none can be dismissed outright. What the puzzle truly reveals is not a solved secret, but how easily fragments of the past resurface when least expected. Whether the footage represents an authentic moment or a misunderstood artifact, its path from a dusty evidence box to the modern internet underscores how powerfully Tupac Shakur's legacy persists, and how even the faintest image connected to his final hours continues to draw the world's attention. Legacy myth and unanswered questions. The closing reflections on the 14-second recording make one truth impossible to ignore. Instead of settling decades of uncertainty, the footage has only deepened the mystery surrounding Tupac Shakur. Rather than offering resolution, it has reopened wounds, stirred debate, and reignited conversations about what truly happened during his final hours. Viewers approach the clip hoping for clarity, but walk away with more questions. Questions that blur the line between verifiable fact and the legend that has grown around his name. The recording becomes less a piece of evidence and more a prism through which people project their hopes, doubts, and memories, reminding the world that some stories refuse to be neatly contained. In the aftermath of the footage spreading across the internet, the people closest to Tupac family colleagues, confidants, and admirers have once again found themselves woven into a larger narrative. Afeni Shakur's determination to protect her son's dignity. Gobi's recollections of those final days, the outlaw's reflections on grief. Suge's conflicting memories and the powerful emotions of millions of supporters together form a living archive that continues to evolve. Their voices, though varied, reveal how much Tupac represented to different communities: an artist, a fighter, a thinker, and a symbol of resilience. Each new discussion sparked by the footage shows that his influence extends far beyond music. It reaches into identity, justice, and the human desire for meaning in tragedy. As the video concludes, it echoes one of Tupac's most unforgettable declarations: "Expect me like you expect Jesus to come back. I'm coming." The line captures the dual nature of his legacy, at once mortal and mythic, present and eternal. Whether the footage is authentic or misunderstood, its impact lies in how it reinforces his extraordinary cultural presence. Tupac endures not because of unanswered questions, but because he embodied a force that transcended a single lifetime. A poet whose words continue to resonate, a visionary whose ideas still provoke thought, and a larger-than-life figure whose story invites endless reflection. The mystery remains, but so does the legacy, and that may be the most fitting truth of all. As the debate surrounding the 14-second clip continues, one thing is certain: the questions it raises may never be fully answered. Yet perhaps that uncertainty is part of why Tupac's legacy endures so powerfully. His life, voice, and vision still challenge, inspire, and provoke conversation nearly 3 decades later. Whether the footage is genuine or misunderstood, it reminds us that legends are not measured solely by facts, but by the impact they leave behind. And here on Legends of Black Excellence, we honor that impact, inviting you to look closer, think deeper, and keep the discussion alive.